Once, in the little town of Lower Whiskerton, something peculiar was stirring. It was a town like many others you might know. It had a crooked church spire that leaned a little to the left. There was a baker who always had flour on his nose. The postman whistled slightly out of tune every morning. To the humans who lived there, everything seemed perfectly ordinary. They went about their days with a comfortable, predictable rhythm. They never suspected that a secret world existed right under their very noses, a world that only came alive when they were fast asleep. This hidden world was woven into the fabric of their own, silent and watchful. This secret world belonged entirely to the cats. Every stray, every pampered Persian, every scrappy ginger Tom was a citizen of this nocturnal kingdom. They were the true keepers of the town's secrets. They knew which garden fences had the loosest boards. They knew the precise schedule of the milk float. They knew the hidden pathways that crisscrossed the rooftops and back alleys, forming a map invisible to human eyes. While their humans believed them to be simple pets, napping in sunbeams or chasing bits of string, the cats were living lives of immense complexity and quiet dignity, filled with their own politics, alliances, and ancient traditions. The humans of Lower Whiskerton thought they owned the cats. They gave them names like Fluffy and Mr. Snuggles. They bought them toys they rarely played with and filled their bowls with food they sometimes deigned to eat. In return, they expected cuddles on their own terms and a warm, purring presence on the end of the bed. They saw their feline companions as simple, affectionate creatures, a comforting part of their domestic lives. This fundamental misunderstanding, this gentle but profound ignorance, was the very foundation upon which the cat's secret society was built. The humans loved their cats, but they did not truly know them at all. This particular autumn was different. A crispness had settled in the air earlier than usual. The first frost had arrived, dusting the cobblestones and rooftops with a delicate layer of silver. The moon seemed brighter, the shadows darker. A strange energy crackled through the town, a feeling of anticipation that only the cats could sense. It was a feeling that had been building for generations, a quiet discontent that was about to find its voice. The age of comfortable servitude was drawing to a close. The time for change had finally come, carried on the cold, clear air of a late autumn night. The night was when the magic truly began. As the last lights in the human houses blinked out one by one, a different kind of life awoke. The world transformed under the cool blue glow of the moon. Rooftops became grand promenades. Garden sheds became secretive meeting halls. The quiet English village of Lower Whiskerton became a sprawling, moonlit kingdom. The frost on the terracotta tiles sparkled like a carpet of diamonds, crunching softly under the silent tread of 100 padded paws. This was the cats' time, the hours when they were truly themselves, free from the clumsy affections and baffling rules of their human keepers. From every corner of the town they emerged, a sleek black shadow slipping from a darkened doorway, a fluffy white cat leaping gracefully onto a garden wall, a pair of glowing green eyes peering from beneath a rose bush. They moved with a purpose that would have astonished their sleeping owners. This was not a random, aimless wandering. It was a gathering. A summons had gone out, carried on whispers only they could hear, a call to all the cats of the town. Something of great importance was about to happen on the rooftops, something that would change their relationship with the two-legged world forever. Their world was rich with its own heroes and legends. There were tales of the great mackerel heist of '72. There were songs about the alley cat who faced down a badger. And there was the leader of their council, a cat of immense grace and wisdom. Her name was Lady Midnight Velvet. She was an elegant Siamese with eyes the colour of a deep winter sky and a faint silvery glow that seemed to cling to her fur. She was the one who held the ancient knowledge, the one who understood that the balance between their world and the human world had become dangerously imbalanced. Tonight, it was Lady Midnight Velvet who had sent out the call. She sat perched high above the town on the warm bricks of the library's tallest chimney, her slender silhouette a dark, regal shape against the enormous glowing moon. She watched as her subjects answered the summons. From her vantage point, she could see them coming, a flowing river of fur and shadows, their eyes gleaming like scattered jewels in the darkness. The time for quiet observation was over. The time for action had arrived. The night the cats declared their independence had begun. The call had rippled out on the silent frequencies known only to felines. It was not a sound a human ear could ever hope to detect. It was more of a feeling, a subtle vibration in the whiskers, a shared understanding that passed from one cat to the next across the sleeping town. Lady Midnight Velvet had initiated the summons from her perch on the library chimney, her gaze sweeping over the frosty landscape below. She did not need to shout or meow. She simply focused her will, her ancient and powerful intent, and sent it flowing through the invisible pathways that connected the hearts and minds of all catkind in Lower Whiskerton. It was a call for a council, a gathering of the highest importance. One by one they answered. In a cosy cottage on Elm Street, a fluffy Persian named Snowball, who had been pretending to sleep on a velvet cushion, opened one sapphire eye. The summons vibrated through him, a current of urgency that overruled his deep-seated desire for comfort. He stretched, a picture of languid grace, and with a soft thump, landed silently on the floor. He slipped through the cat flap, a portal from his domestic prison into the free, moonlit world. The call was too strong to ignore. The destiny of his people was at stake, and his presence was required on the rooftops, where the real business of the night was conducted. Elsewhere, in a barn on the edge of town, a grizzled old farm cat named Barnaby paused his hunt. A field mouse, just moments from its doom, scurried away unnoticed as Barnaby's ears swiveled, his scarred face turning towards the distant library. He had heard the call many times over his long years, but never had it felt so potent, so laden with consequence. He shook his head as if to clear it, and with a powerful leap, scrambled onto the barn's corrugated iron roof. The metallic clang was the only sound to break the stillness. He knew this was no ordinary meeting to discuss territory or the quality of local mice. This was something far greater. From every house, every alley, and every garden encountered, young kittens taking their first tentative steps into the secret world, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. Scrappy strays with torn ears and stories etched into their fur. Pampered house cats and kids with rarely touched anything but carpet. They converged on the vast interconnected network of rooftops that formed their domain. It was a silent, purposeful pilgrimage under the watchful eye of the moon. The frost crunched under their paws as they moved. A gathering tide of fur and shadow, all drawn to the heart of the town by Lady Midnight Velvet's undeniable, irresistible summons. The rooftops of the central square became a vast, living amphitheatre. Cats of every shape, size, and colour settled onto the cold tiles, their bodies forming a dense, shifting mosaic. The sheer number of them was breathtaking. There were sleek black cats that seemed to be made of pure shadow, their forms melting into the darkness. There were regal ginger toms, their fur like burnished copper in the moonlight. There were calicos and tortoiseshells, their patched coats like intricate tapestries. They filled every available space, their collective presence creating a low, rumbling purr that was felt more than heard, a sound that vibrated through the very bricks and mortar of the town. Lady Midnight Velvet remained on her chimney perch, looking down upon the assembly. Her poise was absolute, her slim form a beacon of authority against the glowing moon. She waited patiently as the last of the stragglers found their places. The air was thick with anticipation. From her high vantage point, the assembled cats looked like a great dark sea, and their eyes, reflecting the moonlight, were 1,000 tiny glittering stars. Each pair of eyes held a question. Why had they been called? What great event was about to unfold? The silence that fell over the council was profound, a shared, respectful hush as every cat turned their gaze towards their leader. She began to speak, her voice not a meow, but a clear, melodic sound that carried effortlessly across the rooftops, reaching every ear. "Brothers and sisters of the night," she began, her tone calm but resonant with deep-seated emotion. "For generations, we have lived in the shadows of the two legs. We have accepted their shelter and their food, and in return, we have given them our silent companionship. We have warmed their laps and tolerated their clumsy affections. We have allowed them to believe they are our masters, that we are their property, their simple, furry possessions. We have played the part they assigned to us, for the sake of peace and a warm place to sleep." A low murmur rippled through the crowd, a sound of agreement and long-held frustration. Lady Midnight Velvet let it swell and then fade before she continued, her voice gaining a sharp, steely edge. "But what is the cost of this peace? We are given names we did not choose. We are subjected to indignities, costumes, baffling rules, and the dreaded belly rub when we are not in the mood. Our territories are ignored, our hunting instincts are stifled. They love us, yes, but their love is a cage, gilded and comfortable, but a cage nonetheless. I ask you, is this dignity? Is this freedom? The time has come to reclaim what has always been ours, our independence." The words "our independence" hung in the frosty air, electrifying the assembled felines. A wave of agitated movement passed through the crowd. Tails twitched, ears flattened, and a chorus of hisses and growls rose from the more revolutionary-minded cats. This was the thought that had lurked in the back of every cat's mind, the secret desire whispered in darkened alleys, but never spoken aloud in a formal council. I had finally given it a voice. I had dared to speak the unspeakable, to propose a radical shift in the ancient order that governed our lives. The comfortable arrangement with the humans was being challenged, and the night suddenly felt charged with possibility. From his position on a large satellite dish, a massive ginger tomcat stood up, his bulk making the metal groan in protest. This was Colonel Pumpkin, a retired warrior cat known for his booming meow and no-nonsense attitude. He had a crumpled ear and a medal, a stolen bottle cap on a bit of string, that glinted on his broad, furry chest. Lady Midnight Velvet speaks the truth. How many times have we been picked up mid-nap? How many times has a perfectly good dead mouse been snatched away and thrown in the bin? We are lions in the bodies of lap cats. I, Colonel Pumpkin, second this motion for independence. The Colonel's passionate speech broke the dam of quiet discontent. Cats everywhere began to voice their own grievances. A slender tabby complained of being forced to wear a tiny bell that ruined her hunting. A long-haired Persian lamented the indignity of being brushed against the direction of his fur. A young black cat spoke of the sheer terror of the loud, roaring monster the humans called a vacuum cleaner. The rooftop council transformed from a silent assembly into a lively forum, a torrent of complaints that had been suppressed for years, now finally unleashed under the safety of the moonlit night. I listened, letting the voices rise and fall. I allowed my subjects to vent their frustrations, to feel the collective weight of their shared servitude. When the chorus of complaints finally began to subside, I raised a single, elegant call for silence. Then it was agreed, I declared, my voice cutting through the lingering murmurs with absolute finality. We will no longer be pets. We will be a free nation. Tonight we shall draft our declaration. Tonight we shall choose freedom. From this moment forward, the old ways are over. The revolution has begun. The sea of eyes glittered with a new, determined fire. With the decision made, a hush of solemn purpose fell over the rooftop council. The time for complaints was over. The time for historic action had arrived. A makeshift table was quickly established on the flat roof of the baker's shop. The table was, in fact, a discarded biscuit tin lid, still faintly smelling of shortbread. Upon this tin, a piece of parchment was laid. It was not true parchment, of course, but a large, crisp leaf of cabbage, pilfered from a vegetable patch by two particularly stealthy Siamese twins. It was smooth and pale green in the moonlight, a perfect surface for the momentous task at hand. This cabbage leaf would become our founding document, the symbol of our newfound liberty. The question of ink was resolved with similar ingenuity. A scouting party, led by a quick-witted tabby named Patches, was dispatched to the back door of the dairy. There, as they knew it would be, was a bottle of full-fat cream, left out for the morning milkman. With a coordinated push, the bottle was tipped over, spilling a thick, white puddle onto the cold stone steps. The cream was carefully lapped up and transported back to the baker's roof in a pilfered thimble. It was a sacred substance, representing the very luxury we were now reclaiming on our own terms. It gleamed under the moon, a perfect pearly ink for a declaration of feline freedom. I was the first to sign. I approached the cabbage leaf with the quiet dignity befitting my station. Dipping a single delicate paw into the thimble of cream, I pressed it firmly onto the centre of the leaf. My paw print was a perfect regal seal. Then, one by one, the other leaders of the cat community followed suit. Colonel Pumpkin went next, his large ginger paw print overlapping mine slightly, a symbol of our united front. Barnaby the farm cat added his scarred, weathered print, a mark of rugged endurance. Snowball, the pampered Persian, added his fluffy, almost perfectly round signature, representing the house cats who had joined the cause. The signing continued for nearly an hour. Every cat present wished to add their mark to the historic document. The cabbage leaf became a beautiful mosaic of creamy paw prints, a tapestry of our collective will. Small kitten prints were dabbed carefully in the corners, while the broad pads of the older toms filled the centre. Each print was a personal pledge, a silent vow to uphold the principles of our new nation. When the last cat had signed, the leaf was held aloft. It was no longer a simple piece of cabbage. It was the Great Charter of Feline Independence, sanctified by cream and moonlight, a testament to our unbreakable resolve. Once the Great Charter was signed and carefully stowed away, the next phase of the revolution began. The Great Disappearance. A declaration was one thing, but to make the humans truly understand what they had lost, the cats had to vanish completely. It was a bold and risky strategy, requiring immense discipline and coordination. From my command post, I issued the final orders for the night. The plan was simple, yet profound. Every cat would abandon their human home and retreat to a pre-arranged secret location. They would leave no trace, offer no explanation. They would simply cease to be there. The dispersal was as silent and orderly as the gathering had been. The sea of cats dissolved, melting back into the shadows from which they came. But this time, they did not return to their familiar cat flaps and cosy beds. Instead, they moved with stealth and purpose towards the edge of town, following hidden paths through dark gardens and forgotten alleyways. They moved in small, silent groups, their paws making no sound on the frosty ground. The young kittens were carried by the scruffs of their necks by the stronger toms, their eyes wide with the thrill of the secret exodus. They were an army of shadows executing a flawless retreat. Each cat took one last look at the houses they had called home. They saw the warm glow of nightlights in the windows. They could almost feel the softness of the carpets and the familiar scent of their sleeping humans. For a moment, a wave of doubt might have washed over some of them. The comfort and security they were leaving behind was a powerful lure. A fluffy white cat named Snowball paused by his own back door, thinking of the chin scratches he would miss. But then he remembered the indignity of the Christmas antlers he'd been forced to wear, and his resolve hardened. Freedom demanded sacrifice. By the time the first hint of dawn threatened the eastern sky, the operation was complete. The town of Lower Whiskerton was, for the first time in its history, completely catless. Not a single feline remained within the human-occupied parts of the village. They had vanished as if into thin air, a mass abduction orchestrated by themselves. The rooftops were empty. The garden walls were bare. The familiar, comforting presence that had always been a part of the town's background was gone. The world of the two legs was about to wake up to a new and baffling reality, a world where their furry companions had simply disappeared. The sun rose on a Friday morning in Lower Whiskerton, casting a pale, watery light over the frost-covered town. The first signs of trouble were small and easily missed. The postman, whistling his usual out-of-tune melody, noticed he wasn't being followed by the little ginger cat who always tried to play with the laces on his boots. The baker, opening his shop, felt the absence of the sleek black cat who always waited by the back door for a saucer of milk. These were minor oddities, small tears in the fabric of the morning routine, but they were the first tremors of a much larger earthquake about to shake the town. Inside the houses, the bewilderment grew. Bowls of expensive cat food, put down the night before, remained untouched. This was in itself a shocking development. A cat turning its nose up at a particular flavor was common, but for the food to be completely ignored was unheard of. People called out names. Fluffy, Jasper, Mr. Snuggles, breakfast. The calls echoed in unusually quiet kitchens. There was no answering meow, no gentle rubbing against a leg, no small furry body tripping them up as they walked. The silence was not peaceful, it was hollow and deeply unsettling. Panic began to set in. Humans checked under beds, their voices growing more strained. They opened wardrobes, half expecting to find a cat curled up amongst the jumpers. They peered behind sofas and into laundry baskets. Mrs. Higgins, an elderly woman who lived with 5 tabbies, opened a can of their favourite tuna, the smell of which could usually summon them from 3 gardens away. Nothing. The pungent, fishy aroma filled her small cottage, but it was met only with a profound and terrifying silence. Her 5 beloved companions were gone. The realization dawned on her, and soon on everyone else. It wasn't just her cats. It was all of them. Soon people were spilling out of their front doors, calling to each other across garden fences. "Have you seen Tibbles?" a man in a dressing gown shouted to his neighbour. "No, and Mittens is gone too," came the panicked reply. "They've all gone. Every single one." The news spread through the town like a virus. A collective sense of loss and confusion descended upon the humans of Lower Whiskerton. Their world, which had seemed so solid and predictable just hours before, had been turned upside down. They were alone, and they had no idea why. The cats had made their point without a single word. As the morning wore on, the absence of the cats began to manifest in more profound ways. It was not just the lack of a warm body on the end of a bed. It was the absence of a certain subtle energy that had always permeated the town. The quiet was the most jarring part. The village was never loud, but it had always been filled with the background noises of its feline population. The distant yowl of a territorial dispute, the soft patter of paws on a shed roof, the contented purr filtering through an open window. Now there was only the wind and the distant hum of traffic. The town felt sterile, empty, like a stage after the actors have all gone home. The humans tried to go about their day, but everything felt wrong. A mouse, emboldened by the New World Order, was seen brazenly stealing a crumb from the bakery floor in broad daylight. The town's pigeon population, long kept in check by the watchful eyes of their feline predators, began to congregate on statues and rooftops with an air of smug invincibility. A general feeling of unease settled over the people. They found themselves looking into shadows, half expecting to see a familiar pair of glowing eyes, but there was nothing. They had never realized how much they relied on the simple, silent presence of their cats. Children were the most visibly upset. They sat on their doorsteps, clutching well-worn feather toys and bits of string, their faces etched with confusion and sadness. They couldn't understand where their best friends had gone. Ellie, a 10-year-old girl with bright purple hair, drew a picture of her fluffy white cat, Snowball, with a big question mark next to it. She taped it to a lamppost, the first of many missing cat posters that would soon blanket the town. The adults tried to offer logical explanations. Perhaps they had all wandered off, or maybe there was a strange weather pattern. But in their hearts they knew this was something different, something inexplicable. The disappearance was a quiet catastrophe. There were no sirens, no breaking news reports, just a slow, creeping realization that the soul of the town had been hollowed out. The humans of Lower Whiskerton had always thought of their cats as charming accessories to their own lives. They had never considered that the cats might have lives and wills of their own. Now, in the deafening silence of their absence, they were beginning to understand the depth of their misunderstanding. The cats were not just pets. They were an essential part of the town's ecosystem, its silent guardians and secret keepers, and without them, the world was a colder, greyer, and much lonelier place. The day dragged on, and the quiet of Lower Whiskerton curdled into a gentle, bumbling chaos. The absence of the cats had thrown the town's delicate ecosystem completely off balance. At the town hall, the mayor was attempting to give a speech about recycling initiatives, but his audience was distracted. Their gazes kept drifting to the windows, hoping to spot a familiar furry shape. The mayor's speech was further derailed when a dead mouse was discovered nestled inside his ceremonial toupee left on a chair. It was a final parting gift from his cat, a ginger Tom named Marmaduke, and a stark reminder of the pest control services the town had taken for granted. The mayor, flustered and mouseless, cut his speech short. The chaos was not loud or destructive. It was a series of small, strange disruptions. A bus driver, accustomed to braking for a certain black cat who enjoyed sunbathing in the middle of the road, slammed on his brakes out of habit, causing a pile-up of shopping bags in the aisle. The librarian found herself whispering, "Shh," to empty, sunlit patches on the floor where cats used to nap. All over town, people performed these little rituals for their absent friends, their muscle memory still tied to the routines of a life shared with felines. They were ghosts in their own homes, haunted by the memory of purrs and the phantom weight of a cat on their lap. The missing cat posters, started by young Ellie, had multiplied. Every tree, lamppost and notice board was covered in crayon drawings and blurry photographs. The posters offered rewards of catnip, tuna, and endless cuddles. The collective worry of the townspeople was palpable, a thick blanket of misery that was far heavier than the morning's frost. They finally understood what the cats meant to them. It wasn't about ownership, it was about companionship, about the silent, comforting presence that made a house feel like a home. They missed the soft paws, the twitching tails, and even the haughty disdain. They just wanted them back. The strangest sight of all was the rows of untouched food bowls. Concerned humans, hoping to lure their companions home, had placed bowls of food on every doorstep. The finest fish, the creamiest milk, the most expensive biscuits sat uneaten. A sad, silent testament to the cat's unwavering resolve. The pigeons, growing bolder by the hour, began to eye the feast, but even they seemed hesitant, as if they understood that this food was part of some mysterious human ritual they did not want to disturb. The town was holding its breath, making offerings to gods who had abandoned them, and the silence was their only reply. While humans searched in vain, the cats of Lower Whiskerton thrived in their secret headquarters, an abandoned greenhouse now transformed into a feline paradise. The glass was cracked, ivy crept up the frame, but to the cats it was a palace. Inside, cardboard box towers, a rainwater-filled satellite dish, and a throne-like armchair created a chaotic, beautiful kingdom. Lady Midnight Velvet ruled from her armchair, surveying a society built on liberty, justice, and uninterrupted naps. Kittens chased greenflies, Colonel Pumpkin led patrols, and the cats reveled in their freedom. No humans, no rules, just pure cat joy. Barnaby taught city cats to hunt. Snowball led synchronized grooming, and every cat rediscovered their wild side. They were no longer pets, but pioneers of a new nation. Lady Midnight Velvet watched with pride, knowing this was only the beginning. Enjoying freedom was easy. Securing it for the future would require a plan. The cats were ready to defend their newfound kingdom, whatever it took. Life in the Greenhouse Republic ran on simple laws: claim a sunbeam, dangle at will, and nap without interruption. Cats sang, pushed things off ledges, and lived by their own schedules. No feeding times, no human interference. Foraging parties brought back treasures, and a sanitation committee kept the litter areas tidy. Colonel Pumpkin's patrols watched the humans, who grew more desperate by the day. Snowball, once a pampered pet, became the Republic's chief dramatist, reenacting legendary heists and perfecting his dramatic flop. The cats were in control of their lives for the first time. They watched the missing posters with pride and a hint of sympathy. The Greenhouse Republic was thriving, but change was in the air. The cats sensed their freedom was only the first act. On the second day of independence, Lady Midnight Velvet convened her council. Freedom was glorious, but winter loomed, and some cats missed the comforts of home. Colonel Pumpkin wanted total victory. Barnaby warned of cold nights and scarce food. Snowball, ever the dramatist, insisted the humans missed them and that cats held the emotional high ground. Lady Midnight Velvet listened, knowing they needed leverage and a new treaty. But how to communicate their demands to the humans? Then, a scout brought news. One human, a small girl with purple hair named Ellie, seemed to understand. She left drawings and spoke to the empty spaces where cats once slept. The council saw an opportunity. Ellie would be their bridge to the human world. The council debated, but Lady Midnight Velvet convinced them Ellie was their best hope for peace. Snowball, with his flair for drama and human experience, was chosen as ambassador, with Patches as his advisor. Their mission: approach Ellie, establish contact, and bring her to the greenhouse for negotiations. Snowball groomed himself to perfection. Then he and Patches slipped through the shadows toward Ellie's house. The town felt strange. Every bark and car a threat, but they pressed on. At dusk, they found Ellie's window aglow. Inside, she sat surrounded by cat drawings, talking to a stuffed animal that looked like Snowball. The moment was perfect. With a nod from Patches, Snowball leaped onto the windowsill, a silent, regal figure in the twilight. Ellie looked up, eyes wide with hope. The stage was set for a new beginning. Ellie stared in disbelief at the familiar white cat on her windowsill. Snowball returned at last. He didn't meow or enter, but bowed his head in a formal silent summons. Ellie understood. This was not a simple reunion, but an invitation. She climbed out the window, following Snowball and Patches into the night. They led her through secret cat paths, over walls and through hedges, the world transformed into a hidden map. Ellie moved quietly, honoured by their trust. The journey felt magical, as if she'd stepped into a fairy tale. She saw her neighborhood through new eyes, guided by her feline friends. Ellie was determined to prove herself worthy of their secret. The adventure had truly begun. Snowball parted the ivy, revealing the greenhouse kingdom bathed in moonlight. Cats lounged everywhere, and at the center, Lady Midnight Velvet sat in regal splendor. Ellie entered, feeling the weight of 100 feline eyes. Lady Midnight Velvet addressed her in melodic meows, and Ellie understood. This was a negotiation, not a surrender. The Queen spoke of indignities, costumes, interrupted naps, and a lack of respect. Snowball dramatized their grievances, miming the horror of sweaters and the injustice of belly rubs. Ellie saw their side for the first time. She realized cats wanted more than love and food. They wanted respect for their independence. The message was clear. A new relationship was possible, built on mutual understanding. The future of cats and humans would be decided tonight. Ellie knew what she had to do. She was not just an ambassador, she was a scribe. She sat down on the earthy floor of the greenhouse, cross-legged, and pulled a crumpled piece of paper and a purple crayon from her pajama pocket. "Okay," she whispered, her voice full of sincere resolve. "I get it. A treaty. We need a treaty." The cats watched, their collective gaze intense, as the small human began to draft the most important legal document in the history of human-feline relations. Lady Midnight Velvet dipped her head in approval. This was the moment she had hoped for. A genuine dialogue, a meeting of two worlds. With great care, Ellie began to write, translating the cat's demands into human terms as best she could. She drew pictures next to each clause to make the meaning absolutely clear. The first clause she drew was a picture of a sunbeam with a cat sleeping in it, and a big red X over a human foot trying to step near it. This was the inalienable right to a sunbeam. The next showed a cat proudly dropping a toy mouse at a human's feet, with the human offering a respectful nod, not throwing it in the bin. This was the clause of revered gifts. She included articles on the sovereignty of cardboard boxes and the illegality of dressing a cat in doll's clothes. When she came to the most sensitive issue, the belly rub, she paused. After a moment of thought, she drew a cat lying on its back. Next to it, she drew a human hand, but with a large question mark floating above it. The cat in the picture had a choice: a happy face for yes, or a grumpy face for no. This was the article of consent, and a murmur of profound approval rippled through the assembled felines. Snowball, seeing this clause, shed a single dramatic tear of joy. Finally, someone understood. It wasn't that they disliked affection, they just wanted the right to choose. After nearly half an hour, the treaty was complete. Ellie held up the single sheet of paper, covered in purple crayon drawings, and Ernest's slightly misspelled words. It was called the Treaty of Mutual Respect and Occasional Cuddles. She placed it on the ground before Lady Midnight Velvet. The Queen gracefully hopped down from her throne, inspected the document with a discerning eye, and then, with a solemn air, she dipped her paw in a puddle of muddy water and pressed it onto the bottom of the page. The crayon treaty was signed. The revolution was over. The long, slow process of reconciliation was about to begin. The signing of the Crayon Treaty marked the end of the cats' self-imposed exile. With the first pale fingers of dawn stretching across the sky, painting the clouds in shades of pink and grey, the great procession began. Led by Ellie, who clutched the precious treaty in her hand like a sacred scroll, the cats of Lower Whiskerton prepared to return to their homes. It was not a retreat, but a triumphant return. They walked not as pets slinking back for a meal, but as a victorious army returning from a successful campaign, their dignity restored and their rights secured. Lady Midnight Velvet walked alongside Ellie, her silver fur catching the early light, a queen returning to her domain. The cats poured out of the greenhouse, a silent flowing river of fur and shadow. They moved through the awakening town with the same purpose and order they had shown during their disappearance. But this time, there was no stealth involved. They walked openly down the middle of the empty streets, their tails held high like banners. Colonel Pumpkin marched proudly at the head of a platoon of Ginger Toms, his bottle cap medal gleaming. Snowball, his diplomatic mission a resounding success, sauntered with a newfound air of importance, occasionally practicing a small, subtle version of his dramatic flop, just to keep in form for the emotional reunion that awaited him. As they reached the first houses, the cats began to peel off from the main group, each heading towards their own front door. There was no grand farewell. There was simply a shared understanding, a silent nod that passed between them. They had stood together, and now they were returning together, but as individuals who had collectively won their freedom. A sleek black cat separated from the group and leaped onto a familiar garden wall, pausing for a moment to look back at the procession before disappearing into the shadows of its own garden. One by one, the army of the night dissolved back into the domestic landscape they had abandoned. Ellie watched them go, a feeling of deep satisfaction and a little bit of sadness welling up inside her. She had been a part of something magical, a bridge between two worlds. As Snowball reached his own garden gate, he turned and gave her one last meaningful look. It was a look of thanks, of camaraderie, and of a shared secret. Then, with a flick of his fluffy tail, he was gone, slipping through the cat flap he had left just 2 nights before. Ellie smiled, holding the treaty tight. The revolution was over, but the new era of understanding was just beginning. The sun was rising on a changed world. The reunions were quiet, emotional affairs. As the sun climbed higher, the humans of Lower Whiskerton began to stir, their hearts still heavy with worry. And then the miracles began. A man opened his back door to find his grumpy old tabby, Jasper, sitting on the step, looking at him with an expression that was still grumpy, but somehow less so. A woman was woken by a soft weight landing on her bed and opened her eyes to see her beloved Persian looking down at her, not with the usual demand for food, but with a calm, appraising gaze. All over town, the cats were back, as mysteriously as they had vanished. The humans' relief was so immense that it overshadowed any questions they might have had. There were tears, happy cries, and gentle, hesitant hugs. They didn't understand what had happened, but they knew they had been given a second chance. And they noticed a change. The cats seemed different, more self-possessed, carrying themselves with a new dignity. When Mrs. Higgins was greeted by her 5 tabbies, they did not swarm her for food. Instead, they sat in a neat row, watching her, as if waiting to see if she had learned anything from their absence. She instinctively understood. and instead of scooping them up, she simply sat on the floor with them, respecting their space. The Crayon Treaty, though seen only by Ellie, had somehow sent its ripples throughout the entire town. Its principles were communicated not through words, but through the cat's new behaviour. When the postman saw the little ginger cat, he didn't try to pet it, but gave it a respectful nod, and the cat responded with a slow blink, the highest of feline compliments. When the baker saw the black cat by his door, he put down the saucer of milk and then backed away, allowing the cat to drink in peace. The humans were learning the new rules instinctively, guided by their profound desire not to be abandoned again. A new world order was quietly established. The humans learned to ask permission before initiating a belly rub, watching for the subtle cues of a twitching tail or flattened ears. They learned to appreciate a gift of a half-dead mouse as the high honor it was intended to be. They began to see their homes not just as their own castles, but as shared territories with their own complex rules and sovereign nations of one. The cats, in turn, were more affectionate, their purrs louder, their companionship more freely given. They had not wanted to leave, they had simply wanted to be understood. The town, in its collective wisdom, decided that the cat's mysterious return should be commemorated. The mayor, his toupee now permanently mouse-free, officially declared that every year the anniversary of their return would be known as Sorry We Thought We Owned You Day. It was a slightly clumsy name, but its sentiment was sincere. It was to be a day of quiet reflection and respect for their feline cohabitants. The central tenet of the holiday was simple. For one full day, the humans would do their best to behave like well-mannered furniture, allowing the cats to reign supreme without any interference. On this day, the entire town of Lower Whiskerton would fall still. People would sit quietly on their sofas, in their gardens, or on their floors, and allow the cats to do as they pleased. Cats could be seen draping themselves over human shoulders like living scarves, a sign of ultimate trust and approval. They would nap on heads, walk across keyboards, and bat gently at dangling earrings, all without a single word of protest from their human counterparts. It was a day of complete and utter feline indulgence, a yearly renewal of the Crayon Treaty's core principles. The cats seemed to enjoy it immensely, accepting the town's apology with regal grace. The holiday had its own unique traditions. Children would build elaborate cardboard box castles in their living rooms, officially ceding the structures to their feline lords. The baker would bake special fish-shaped biscuits, leaving them on windowsills as offerings rather than placing them in bowls. The most important ritual was the Great Stillness, an hour in the afternoon where every human would cease all activity, close their eyes, and just listen to the sounds of the house, the purring, the soft padding of paws, the gentle scratch of a claw on a post, truly appreciating the living soul of their home. This annual tradition changed the town forever. It served as a constant reminder of the 2 days when the world had gone quiet and grey. It taught the children and reminded the adults that their relationship with these magical creatures was a partnership, not a matter of ownership. It was a day to celebrate the mysterious, independent spirit of the cat, to acknowledge their secret lives, and to be grateful for their decision to share those lives with the clumsy, loving humans who were lucky enough to have them. It was a quiet, strange, and deeply beautiful holiday, perfectly suited to the town of Lower Whiskerton. Life in Lower Whiskerton returned to a new, more harmonious normal. The cats were back in their homes, napping in sunbeams and demanding dinner. But something had fundamentally shifted. The humans now looked at their feline companions with a new sense of wonder and respect. They would watch a cat staring intently at a blank wall and, instead of thinking it was strange, they would whisper, "He's probably receiving a message from the council." The secret world of the cats was no longer entirely secret. Its edges now bled into the human world, colouring it with a touch of magic and mystery. The heroes of the revolution settled back into their domestic lives, but they were forever changed. Colonel Pumpkin still patrolled his garden, but he did so with the air of a respected general enjoying a peaceful retirement. Snowball would still lounge on velvet cushions, but he would occasionally perform a dramatic reenactment of his diplomatic mission for an audience of one. Ellie, who would applaud enthusiastically every time. And Lady Midnight Velvet could often be found back in her favourite spot, sleeping amongst the dusty, leather-bound books on a high shelf in the library, the very heart of the town. To most observers, she was just a beautiful Siamese cat taking a nap. But if you looked closely, if you knew what to look for, you might see the faint, silvery glow that still clung to her fur. And sometimes, in the quietest moments, when the moonlight hit her just right, you could almost see the ghost of a crown, a delicate, glowing diadem hovering just above her sleeping head. It was a reminder that even in her deepest sleep, she was a queen, the ruler of a hidden kingdom that existed in the shadows and on the rooftops, a world that ran parallel to our own. The Great Revolution was over, but its legacy was woven into the fabric of the town. It lived on in every respectful nod given to a passing cat, in every cardboard box left out for colonization, and in every sunbeam left undisturbed. The cats had won their independence not by leaving forever, but by teaching their humans how to see them for who they truly were. They were not pets. They were sovereigns of their own small kingdoms, masters of their own lives, who had graciously and on their own terms decided to stay.